Beloved brothers and sisters, have you noticed that something feels different lately? Maybe you feel unsettled. Maybe you feel stretched. Maybe things you once enjoyed no longer satisfy you. Maybe you feel misunderstood, isolated, or burdened in a way you can't fully explain. Let me tell you this clearly and with faith. That feeling may not be confusion. Feeling different is often one of the first ways God signals that something new is happening within you. Many people assume that when they feel unsettled, restless, or out of place, something is wrong. But in the spiritual life, those inner shifts can be signs that God is actively at work, preparing you for something greater than where you are now. God rarely announces preparation with comfort. Instead, He begins by stirring the heart, disrupting familiar patterns, and awakening a deeper awareness that life cannot remain the same. When God is preparing you for a bigger assignment, He often changes your inner appetite. Things that once satisfied you no longer do. Activities, conversations, and goals that once felt meaningful may begin to feel shallow or empty. This does not mean those things were sinful or wrong. It means you are growing beyond them. Just as a child outgrows clothes without trying, the Spirit outgrows seasons without warning. That sense of difference is evidence that God is enlarging your capacity and redirecting your focus toward higher purposes. This inner stirring can also feel uncomfortable because it exposes areas where growth is needed. God allows you to feel the tension between who you are and who you are becoming. That tension is not meant to discourage you, but to draw you closer to Him. When you feel different, you may become more aware of your weaknesses, your fears, or your limitations. Yet this awareness is actually an invitation. God reveals these areas not to shame you, but to strengthen you, because the next assignment will require deeper faith, greater humility, and stronger dependence on Him. Feeling different can also include a heightened sensitivity to spiritual things. You may feel more convicted about attitudes, words, or habits that never bothered you before. You may feel drawn to prayer, silence, or scripture in a new way. This is not accidental. God sharpens your discernment before He entrusts you with more responsibility. A greater assignment requires clearer spiritual vision, and that clarity begins on the inside long before anything changes on the outside. Another reason this season feels strange is because God is shifting your identity before He shifts your position. You may still be in the same job, the same family, or the same church, but inwardly you know you are not the same person. God is teaching you to see yourself differently. He begins to remove labels that were shaped by past failures, human opinions, or limited thinking, and replaces them with a deeper understanding of who you are in Him. This internal redefinition can feel confusing because you are learning to live from a new identity that has not yet been fully revealed to others. Feeling different may also include loneliness. When God is preparing you, He sometimes reduces noise around you. This is not because people are abandoning you, but because God is creating space to speak more clearly. In quieter seasons, you begin to hear His voice without distraction. Solitude becomes a classroom where God teaches lessons that crowds cannot teach. While loneliness can feel painful, it often produces clarity, maturity, and spiritual authority that cannot be developed any other way. It is important to understand that feeling different does not mean you have lost your way. It often means you are being redirected. God rarely prepares people for greater assignments by leaving them unchanged. Change begins internally because the weight of what is coming cannot rest on an unprepared foundation. The discomfort you feel now may be protecting you from collapse later. God strengthens the roots before He increases the height. Instead of resisting this season or trying to return to what feels familiar, wisdom calls you to lean into God. Ask Him what He is shaping, what He is removing, and what He is building within you. Trust that the inner shift you feel is purposeful. God is not confusing you, He is aligning you. He is stirring your spirit because the assignment ahead requires a deeper, wiser, and more grounded version of you. Feeling different is not the end of something, it is often the beginning of God's next move in your life. One of the consistent patterns seen in the way God works with people is that He separates before He elevates. Separation is not always dramatic or sudden. Often it happens quietly, internally, and over time, When God is preparing someone for a greater assignment, He begins by creating distance between that person and what is familiar, comfortable, or limiting. This distance can feel confusing or even painful, but it serves a divine purpose. Elevation requires a different environment, and God lovingly removes what cannot go where He is taking you. Separation often begins with a shift in relationships. You may notice that some connections feel strained, unnecessary, or no longer aligned with who you are becoming. This does not mean those people are bad or that the relationships were a mistake. Many relationships are seasonal, designed to support a particular stage of growth. When the season changes, God allows certain connections to fade so they do not hinder the next phase. Holding on to relationships that no longer fit can slow spiritual growth and dilute focus, so God gently loosens those ties. Along with relationships, God also separates you from environments that no longer nurture your calling. Places that once felt comfortable may start to feel restrictive. You may feel restless in spaces where you once thrived. This restlessness is not ingratitude, it is awareness. God is revealing that your current environment cannot support the weight of your future responsibility. Elevation requires room to grow, and separation creates that room. Separation also occurs in the area of mindset. God challenges old ways of thinking that once felt normal. Limiting beliefs, negative patterns, and self-defeating attitudes are exposed and confronted. This mental separation can be difficult because it requires unlearning what feels familiar. Yet God knows that a new assignment cannot be carried with an old mindset. Before He elevates your position, He renews your thinking so you can steward success, influence, or authority wisely. Another aspect of separation is emotional detachment from sources of identity that are no longer healthy. God may separate you from the need for constant approval, recognition, or validation from others. As long as your identity depends on people's opinions, elevation becomes dangerous. God desires to anchor your sense of worth in Him alone. This process can feel like rejection, but it is actually protection. God is teaching you to stand firm even when applause is absent, so you will not be shaken when responsibility increases. Separation does not always mean isolation, but it often includes seasons of reduced visibility. God sometimes hides those He intends to elevate. In these quieter seasons, pride is addressed, humility is cultivated, and motives are purified. Without the pressure to perform for others, you learn to obey God for His approval alone. What feels like being overlooked may actually be God preserving you until you are ready to be seen without being destroyed by attention. It is important to understand that separation is not punishment. It is preparation. God separates not because He wants to take something away, but because He wants to give something better. Just as a farmer separates seeds before planting, God separates His servants before positioning them. This ensures that what is planted will grow strong and bear lasting fruit. Elevation without separation often leads to confusion, compromise, or collapse. Resisting separation can delay elevation. When people cling tightly to what God is asking them to release, they remain stuck between seasons. Trusting God in this process requires faith and surrender. It means believing that God sees what you cannot see and knows what you need for where you are going. Even when separation feels uncomfortable, it is guided by divine wisdom and love. Ultimately, separation prepares you to walk confidently into your next assignment without being pulled backward by old attachments. It sharpens focus, strengthens faith, and aligns your heart with God's purpose. When elevation comes, you will recognize that the distance God created was necessary. What once felt like loss will reveal itself as alignment, and you will be grateful that God loved you enough to separate you before He lifted you higher. Explain me to key point 3 in 700 words without heading. Pressure is one of the most misunderstood tools God uses in the life of a believer. Many people assume that pressure means something is wrong, that they have missed God, or that they are being opposed beyond what they can handle. Yet throughout Scripture and life, pressure often appears right before purpose is revealed. When God is preparing someone for a greater assignment, He allows pressure not to crush them, but to shape them. Pressure is not proof of God's absence. It is often evidence of His intentional involvement. Pressure reveals what is truly inside a person. When life is comfortable, weaknesses, fears, and unhealthy patterns can remain hidden. Under pressure, attitudes surface, priorities become clear, and faith is tested. God does not expose these things to embarrass you, but to refine you. The next level of responsibility will demand emotional stability, spiritual maturity, and trust in God rather than in circumstances. Pressure brings these qualities to the surface so they can be strengthened. Pressure also stretches capacity. Just as muscles grow by resisting weight, faith grows by resisting pressure. Without resistance, there is no development. God allows situations that feel heavier than what you are used to because He is increasing what you can carry. You may feel overwhelmed at times, but that feeling often comes from growth, not failure. What once would have broken you now bends you instead, showing that your strength is increasing even when it does not feel like it. Another purpose of pressure is to realign dependence. In seasons of ease, it is easy to rely on skills, resources, or people. Under pressure, those supports may feel insufficient, forcing you to lean more fully on God. This deepened reliance is essential for greater purpose. A bigger assignment requires a deeper prayer life, sharper discernment, and a stronger connection to God. Pressure pushes you toward the source of strength, rather than allowing you to remain self-reliant. Pressure also produces clarity. When time feels short and demands feel high, distractions lose their power. You become more aware of what truly matters and what does not. God uses pressure to strip away unnecessary commitments, unhealthy attachments, and misplaced priorities. This narrowing of focus is not loss, it is alignment. Purpose becomes clearer when excess is removed, and pressure accelerates that process. It is important to understand that pressure is often a sign of trust. God does not apply intense pressure to what He considers disposable. He applies it to what He values and intends to use. The weight you feel may indicate that God sees strength in you that you have not yet recognized. He is shaping you to carry responsibility with wisdom and endurance. Pressure prepares you to remain steady when others might collapse under the same load. Pressure also builds perseverance. A greater assignment will not only require ability but endurance. God is more concerned with your long-term faithfulness and with short-term comfort. Pressure teaches you to keep going even when relief does not come quickly. It develops patience, resilience, and quiet confidence in God's timing. These qualities cannot be learned in ease. They are forged in difficulty. At times, pressure may feel isolating. You may sense that others do not fully understand what you are carrying. This isolation can deepen your relationship with God, creating space for intimacy and trust. When human solutions fall short, divine wisdom becomes more precious. Pressure refines your spiritual hearing and strengthens your inner life in ways that crowds and applause never could. The danger is not pressure itself, but misinterpreting it. If you see pressure as punishment, it will lead to discouragement. If you recognize it as preparation, it will produce hope. God never wastes pressure. Every challenge, delay, and demand is measured by His wisdom. He knows exactly how much pressure you need to become who you must be for the assignment ahead. In time, you will look back and see that the pressure did not break you, it built you. What once felt unbearable will become the foundation of your strength. Pressure is proof that purpose is forming. God is shaping your character, expanding your capacity, and preparing you to carry what is coming with grace, humility, and faith. Preparation in God's plan often takes place far from public attention, in seasons that feel quiet, ordinary, or even invisible. Many people expect God to prepare them through visible success, applause, or rapid progress, but more often He chooses hidden places. These are moments when nothing seems to be happening outwardly, yet profound work is being done inwardly. What feels like stillness or delay is frequently a sacred workshop where God shapes character, faith, and obedience. Hidden seasons teach patience. When progress is slow and recognition is absent, impatience surfaces easily. God uses this time to train the heart to wait without complaining and to trust without seeing immediate results. Waiting refines motives. It reveals whether obedience is driven by love for God or by the desire for recognition. A bigger assignment requires the ability to remain faithful even when no one is watching. And hidden places are where that faithfulness is tested and strengthened. In these quiet seasons, God often deals with inner issues that would be dangerous if left unaddressed. Pride, insecurity, fear, and the need for approval can hide behind talent and activity. When activity is stripped away, these issues come to the surface. God addresses them gently but firmly because unresolved inner struggles can undermine future influence. Hidden preparation is God's mercy, preventing future failure by dealing with present weaknesses. Hidden places also deepen intimacy with God. Without constant demands from people or expectations from public roles, there is space to listen more closely to His voice. Prayer becomes less about performance and more about relationship. Scripture becomes nourishment rather than obligation. In this intimacy, God reveals His heart, not just His instructions. Knowing God deeply is essential for carrying out His purposes with humility and wisdom. Another purpose of hidden preparation is skill development. God often uses unnoticed moments to refine abilities, sharpen discernment, and strengthen discipline. What you practice in obscurity prepares you for effectiveness in visibility. Just as a seed develops underground before breaking through the soil, growth happens first where it cannot be seen. The strength of what emerges is directly connected to what was developed in secret. Hidden seasons also teach stewardship. When resources are limited and opportunities seem small, you learn to value and manage what you have. God watches how you handle little before entrusting you with much. Faithfulness in small responsibilities reveals readiness for greater ones. The discipline learned in scarcity prepares you to remain grounded in abundance. There is often a sense of loneliness in hidden places. Fewer people may understand your journey, and encouragement may feel scarce. This loneliness, though painful, can purify reliance. God becomes your primary source of affirmation and direction. When approval comes from Him rather than from people, you are less likely to be swayed by praise or criticism later. Hidden places strengthen identity so that future visibility does not distort it. It is also in hidden seasons that obedience is refined. When God asks you to do small, unseen acts of faithfulness, your response reveals the posture of your heart. Obedience without applause is one of the clearest signs of spiritual maturity. God values this kind of obedience because it reflects trust, not ambition. A greater assignment requires a heart that obeys quickly and fully, regardless of who is watching. Hidden preparation can feel frustrating because it contradicts cultural expectations of success. Yet God's ways prioritize depth over speed and faithfulness over fame. He is not in a hurry because He knows that lasting impact requires solid foundations. Rushing preparation would risk collapse later. What God builds slowly, He builds to last. In time, the hidden work becomes visible. When God brings you into public responsibility, others may call it sudden, but you will know it was the result of long, unseen preparation. The strength, wisdom, and confidence you carry will be rooted in what God formed in secret. Hidden places are not wasted places. They are holy places where God prepares His servants thoroughly for what lies ahead. Before God expands what a person does, He first transforms who that person is. This principle is central to how God prepares individuals for greater responsibility. Many people desire new opportunities, increased influence, or larger platforms. But God focuses on inner formation before outward promotion. A change in activity without a change in character can lead to failure. But when God reshapes the heart first, the work that follows is sustained and fruitful. God begins by addressing identity. He wants you to understand who you are in Him before you step into new assignments. Without a secure identity, success can inflate pride, and opposition can destroy confidence. God works to remove false identities rooted in past mistakes, achievements, or the opinions of others. He replaces them with a deeper assurance of belonging and purpose. When identity is settled, you are able to serve faithfully without being driven by insecurity or the need for validation. Character development is another critical aspect of this inner transformation. God values integrity, humility, and faithfulness more than talent or visibility. These qualities are not developed quickly or easily. They are formed through daily choices, unseen obedience, and consistent surrender. God uses ordinary situations to test and strengthen character, knowing that the pressure of a greater assignment will expose whatever is unformed within you. By shaping character first, God ensures that influence does not outgrow maturity. God also reshapes the way you think. Old thought patterns that once guided your decisions may no longer serve the purpose He has planned. Fear, doubt, and limited expectations must be replaced with faith, wisdom, and discernment. This mental transformation often involves confronting internal resistance and learning to trust God beyond what feels familiar. A new assignment requires new thinking, because the challenges ahead will demand spiritual insight rather than natural reasoning. Emotional maturity is another area God addresses before expanding your role. God prepares you to handle disappointment, criticism, and delay without losing peace or purpose. Emotional instability can derail even the most gifted individual. Through various experiences, God teaches you patience, self-control, and compassion. These qualities enable you to lead, serve, and influence others with grace rather than reaction. A greater assignment requires emotional strength that only God can cultivate over time. God also works on obedience. Before entrusting you with larger responsibilities, He watches how you respond to small instructions. Obedience reveals trust. When you obey God in hidden or inconvenient moments, you demonstrate readiness for more. God shapes your will to align with His, so that when greater decisions come, your heart is already conditioned to choose faithfulness over comfort. Obedience becomes less about obligation and more about relationship. Another part of inner preparation is refining motivation. God examines why you desire more. Is it for recognition, control, or personal gain, or is it for service and obedience? God purifies motives so that ambition does not overshadow calling. When motives are aligned with His heart, the work becomes an expression of worship rather than a pursuit of status. This refinement protects you from burnout and compromise when demands increase. God also develops spiritual discernment before expanding influence. Greater assignments involve greater complexity, responsibility, and impact on others. Discernment helps you navigate decisions wisely and avoid unnecessary pitfalls. God sharpens your ability to hear His voice clearly, especially in moments of pressure. This discernment is rooted in an intimate relationship with Him, formed long before public responsibility increases. The transformation God brings is often subtle and gradual, which is why it can be overlooked or misunderstood. Yet this slow work is intentional. God values depth over speed and formation over appearance. By the time He changes what you do, you will be able to handle it with wisdom, humility, and endurance. Ultimately, God's priority is not just the success of the assignment, but the well-being of the person carrying it. By changing who you are before what you do, God ensures that the fruit of your labor will last. The outer expansion will reflect the inner work already completed, and your life will be able to sustain the weight of the calling God has placed upon you. A bigger assignment from God always requires a deeper level of surrender. Surrender is often misunderstood as weakness or loss of control, but in the life of faith, it is the doorway to true strength and authority. When God prepares someone for greater responsibility, He invites them to release their grip on personal plans, preferences, and comfort. This release is not meant to diminish them, but to align them fully with His will. Because what God entrusts to you must be carried His way, not your own. Surrender begins with trust. You cannot yield your life, future, or desires to someone you do not trust. God patiently builds this trust through past faithfulness, answered prayers, and even through trials that reveal His sustaining power. As trust deepens, surrender becomes less frightening. You begin to believe that God's plans, even when unclear, are wiser and safer than your own. A bigger assignment demands this level of trust, because the path ahead will often require decisions that do not make sense by human standards. Surrender also involves releasing control over outcomes. Many people are willing to obey God as long as they can predict the results. True surrender obeys without guarantees. God prepares you to let go of timelines, expectations, and the need for certainty. This freedom from control allows God to work creatively and powerfully through your life. When you stop trying to manage everything, you become more sensitive to God's direction and more responsive to His leading. Another dimension of surrender is the willingness to let God reshape your desires. Sometimes God does not just change where you go or what you do, He changes what you want. This process can be uncomfortable because it challenges long-held dreams or ambitions. Yet God knows which desires will ultimately fulfill you and which will limit you. By surrendering your desires, you make room for God to plant new ones that align with your calling and bring lasting joy. Surrender also requires humility. A greater assignment often comes with increased visibility or influence, and without humility, pride can quickly grow. God teaches you to remain dependent on Him even as responsibilities increase. Humility keeps your heart teachable and your spirit sensitive. It reminds you that success is not self-produced, but God-enabled. Through surrender, you acknowledge that apart from God, you can do nothing of lasting value. Fear is another area God addresses through surrender. Bigger assignments naturally involve greater risk, opposition, and uncertainty. Fear can paralyze or distract if it is not surrendered to God. When you place your fears in His hands, you allow His peace to guard your heart. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing obedience despite fear. Surrender empowers courage because it shifts responsibility from your strength to God's faithfulness. Surrender also includes the willingness to serve rather than seek status. God's kingdom operates differently from the world's systems. Greatness in God's eyes is measured by faithfulness and love, not position or recognition. A surrendered heart serves willingly, even when service is costly or unnoticed. This posture prepares you to lead with compassion and integrity when influence increases. Another essential aspect of surrender is perseverance. God may not reveal the full scope of the assignment all at once. He often leads step by step, requiring ongoing surrender at each stage. This continual yielding strengthens faith and keeps you aligned with God's timing. Instead of rushing ahead or lagging behind, surrender allows you to move in rhythm with God's pace. Surrender is not a one-time decision, it is a daily posture. Each new level of responsibility requires a fresh yielding of the heart. God does not force surrender, He invites it. When you respond willingly, you position yourself to receive what He has prepared. The weight of a bigger assignment cannot be carried by human strength alone. It must be carried by a life fully yielded to God. In the end, surrender does not reduce your life, it enlarges it. What you place in God's hands is never wasted. As you surrender, God releases grace, wisdom, and power sufficient for the task ahead. A bigger assignment requires greater surrender because only a surrendered life can fully reflect God's purpose and glory through it. In conclusion, if you have been feeling different, stretched, or unsettled, it is important to see this season through God's perspective. What may feel uncomfortable is often intentional. God prepares before He promotes, separates before He elevates, and applies pressure to produce purpose. He works deeply in hidden places, reshaping who you are before expanding what you do and calling you into greater surrender. So, His will can be accomplished through your life. Every stage of preparation has meaning. Nothing is wasted and nothing is accidental. God is forming strength, character, faith, and obedience within you so that when the assignment comes, you will be able to carry it well. The changes you feel are not signs of loss, but signs of alignment. God is positioning you for something greater than what you have known before. Therefore, do not resist the process. Trust God's timing. Embrace His shaping and remain faithful where you are. What He is preparing you for will require all that He is developing in you now. If you stay surrendered and obedient, you will discover that this season was not a delay, but a divine setup for the purpose God has ordained for your life.